And as far as gifted students, we're going to talk a tiny bit about gifted students later. This is primarily focused on special education. Ooh. Okay, for some reason I froze, sorry. This is primarily focused on special education, but I will talk a little bit about gifted students and making sure that we are also keeping those students in mind when we're thinking about inclusion. I do agree. That we have to always keep those students in mind as well. So back to staffing, and thank you for the questions. I think this makes it much more interesting and engaging, and hopefully makes this more useful to all of you. So as far as training, or staffing, we want to make sure that we're providing enough support in classrooms. One of the things that makes inclusion not work is when we don't have enough teachers in the classroom or enough people who are working with the students. We need to make sure that we have the teachers, special education and general education, good, solid training in academic and learning and behavioral needs of students. We also want to make sure that the assistants that we have in the classroom have knowledge of how to support students as well. It's not okay just to add people into a classroom. They have to be people who are trained and people who understand and know how to work with students with disabilities. And ideally, in a perfect world, for inclusion to be highly effective, it's a general education teacher and a special education teacher working together. So those two teachers being in the classroom all day long, or at the very, very least during the core academic subjects, during the math and the reading and the writing, to make sure that those students are getting extra support. Inclusion takes a lot of staffing. Sometimes people think that inclusion means that a general education teacher can just serve all of the kids in the classroom. And there have been places in the United States that have tried it and thought that it's less expensive. It's not. Inclusion's much more expensive because it requires those two teachers working together in order for it to be highly effective. So let's see. A couple of questions. So there are a couple of questions about particular students and how to sort of think about how inclusion can affect others in the classroom. I'm going to save these two questions and I'll come back to them because I do think that inclusion can definitely affect the learning of other students if it is not done correctly. So we want to make sure that we have adequate staffing within a classroom so that the needs of all students can be met. Because if there's just one teacher in a classroom and a wide range of students, it's near to impossible for that teacher to meet the needs of every single student. So we definitely want to make sure that we are providing enough people in the classroom to be able to support the range of students. And I see that there's a parent who brought up their child. Yes, if you have students who are struggling with learning and that need extra support, it's one of the most important things that we can do is to provide classroom support within those schools that they're attending. If that is not available, one of the gifts that we've had, I hate to say gifts from anything from the pandemic, but we have definitely enhanced our online and virtual instructional methods for students. And I'd be happy to share some information about that at the end as well. So sort of when we go back to thinking about how to start inclusion and how to get it rolling in your schools, it's so important to build your community. We often will start with thinking about educating staff, and we'll tell staff about the various disabilities, and we'll give them some skills, and we'll add some curricula so that they have different options for using for instruction. But I think that misses the mark. One of the first things we have to do when we're thinking about designing an inclusive environment for our students is to start with the families and start with all of the people that are involved in your school, and making sure that all of the families, all of the parents, all of the students know that you value everyone in their school, that everyone can learn and everyone has a capacity for learning. So it's very, very important to think about the fact that we want to model caring for students. We want to share that we value all of that. And I see that a question just came into the chat asking, how do you break the news to parents? Once you have started, I think one of the best parts of having a community in which all students are valued is that you've already set that up for your parents. They know that you care about all of your students. They know that all students can learn, and that you believe that all students can learn. And you have this sense of care of the community. But when you share the information with parents, parents go through a grieving process. They really do. It is not easy to find out that your child has a disability. It's not easy to find out that your child is a struggling learner. So we have to share the information, but we also have to share hope. We have to share a belief that we know that this child is going to be able to learn, that this child is going to be able to progress, that this child is going to be able to have a fulfilled life in the future. Not everyone's fulfilled life looks the same. So we really want to make sure that parents are given those supports to help them understand the disability, as well as to recognize that their child does have potential for growth and potential for learning. So that's this whole idea of setting up an environment where your school feels as if it's a place that is a caring and valuing environment for all students. So when we think about co-teaching, this idea of staffing and supporting teachers within buildings, there are a couple of different ways that this is done. And there's not one best way, unfortunately. I wish we could say that it is just one way to do it and that everybody should do it the same way. It doesn't work that way. It depends upon your school. It depends upon what your staffing options are. But one option is to have one general education teacher and then a supporting special education teacher who's there to work with all of the students who are struggling in the school. And then there's the idea of having two teachers that work full-time, and within that classroom, they always split. So it might be that one teacher starts the instruction and then they take small groups and they work with small groups of students. Another option is a class within a class. So you might have a regular class and then have a group of students that are in special education that have a small group within the classroom. So there might be reading instruction, and then they go into a separate little spot in the classroom and do their own little reading instruction. And then one thing that is very popular in elementary schools is to have small group rotations. So you'll have different groups around the classroom, so that you'll take a large group of students and then they break up into small groups and they rotate within the classroom. So there are lots of different options that you can do. And usually what happens is that these large classrooms tend to need to be broken up into smaller groups at different times within the classroom. Oh, there's a question here about in the United States, is it allowed for parents to attend their children's classes? No, parents don't generally come to school with their children. It's very, very uncommon. And there have been times when, of course, parents will come and visit, but no, they don't go to school with their children. But during the pandemic, of course, parents became a vital role in their children's education, because they had to help their students when they were working on, their virtual learning. Very, very difficult. So one other support that we use often in the United States is classroom assistants. So you'll hear them called paraprofessionals, paraeducators, educational assistants, and these are not teachers. These are supports that are allowing our students who have disabilities to have more access to the general education classroom. So they might be another adult that is with that student to help them with things such as academic support. So maybe to help them with do one-on-one instruction next to them if during a regular lesson. It might be a teacher who's helping a student with behavioral support. So it might be helping them with some sort of a behavioral intervention. It might be someone to help them to calm a student down if you have a student who's much more upset. These also might be people who help with daily living skills, because we have students in our regular education classrooms who struggle with things such as toileting or feeding. So though these might be paraeducators, paraprofessionals, assistants that are even supporting those types of things. Most of our classroom assistants do not have college degrees. They have high school diplomas, and they get their training from the special education teachers within each of these classrooms. So we know that we have to provide instruction and training in order for these individuals to be very successful in supporting our students with disabilities. I wanted to stop for very briefly to see if there are other questions about just general setting up the environment for inclusion. I know I've tried to hit a couple of questions already, but I just wanted to just take a breather in case. Let's see. Yes, here's a question. What if the parent doesn't like the assistant teacher with their child? That's a hard one. I think that could be in many different directions. It could just be that it's not the right assistant with that child, or it might be that a parent doesn't want an assistant at all. This is a very hard thing. This is where, having a relationship with the families is so important. The teachers talking to the parents, talking to the families, explaining that having that assistant in the classroom can increase the learning of their child. Parents can often be more open to it. Another piece is that oftentimes the assistants in the classroom work for the whole classroom, not just for a particular child. There are times when we have what we call a one-on-one assistant, where it's just one child and one assistant working together. But usually those classroom assistants work with all of the students in the classroom. And one of the things that is really beneficial during inclusion is that it makes getting extra help more acceptable to everybody in the classroom, not just those children with severe disabilities. It's helpful for all children, and all students in general. So I think that can be a better way to approach having that assistant. If you say that it's an assistant for the whole classroom rather than just that child, parents often will accept that more so. So that's one option to think about. It says, are parents carried along in the process of inclusion? So generally, parents have to be involved in the whole process. We make sure that parents are aware of everything that's happening in classrooms. In the United States, you have to, as a parent, agree to allow your child to have special education services. So parents are a part of the process all the way through, from the beginning and then throughout the whole school year. And then every year we rewrite that education plan, and the parents are a part of that process too. So we definitely involve parents across the board with everything in what we do. So good question. Let's see. So when we're thinking about the range of supports that we provide our students, this is where, when I was preparing this, I was like, oh my goodness, what do I start with? And how do I sort of at least share some information, which is one of the reasons that I gave you all a list of, and I'll put it back in the chat at the end, just for those of you who hopped on a little bit later. But it's a list of resources for you to use down the road in case you're looking for information. But there are some basic strategies that we can do to make sure that inclusion is more likely to be successful for students. And one of the first things that we always stress is the importance of creating environments in the classroom that are supportive of all students. We focus a lot on positive behavioral interventions and supports. You'll see that written as PBIS or MTSS. But the idea is that when you set up your classroom environment and there are clear rules and expectations, so students know, here's what we want you to do, here's how you should do it, and we teach them how to be in school, not just the learning of school, but how to be in school. Teaching them, so common rules might be respectful of others, be responsible in your classroom, be ready to learn, those types of questions, so those types of rules. And then setting up classrooms that are very well organized so that students know where all of the things are in the classroom. They feel like it's their space. They know the routines of the classroom. They know how to get things done in the classroom, and that there are very clear schedules. So we want to make these environments that are very, very predictable so that students know what's expected of them, and that teachers have given children the skills to learn how to be students in classrooms. And very importantly, we have to praise our students. Very often, teachers will just assume that students know how to act in school, or they'll just assume that they should behave in school. And we rarely, as teachers, tell students when they're doing the right thing. But we are very good at telling them when they're being naughty or inappropriate or wrong. So we really want to take the time to tell students when they are behaving correctly in the classroom, when they're learning well in the classroom, and you want to be very specific. We call this behavior-specific praise. So telling students, for example, if you have a student who has attention deficit disorder, telling them that they focused well on an assignment, they did great work on their math assignment. And we don't want to rely on punishment and reprimands all the time, because punishment is all it does is actually increase aggression in students when we punish, or it makes students not want to engage in instruction. So we really want to focus more on teaching those skills. So there's a question here. Can nonverbal students with autistic children join the mainstream schools using AAC devices? Yes, they can. And I think that's one of the things that we need to focus on with inclusion, is really thinking about the range of what students can gain from being in inclusive classrooms. For some students, it's going to be being in an inclusive classroom and learning to read and run and play and do math with all of the other students. Other students, the main goal of inclusion might be social. It might be that a student is learning to be social around other students. So it's really vast. We really need to think about the goals for every single student. But I would say that for every single child, whether or not they are 7 years old or 17 years old, they need to know when they're doing the right thing in school. So we need to focus on teaching them how to behave in school and how to be successful in school. But also knowing that some students will always need more. We do have students who have challenging behavior that need what we call functional behavioral assessments, where we look at their behavior and think, oh, why are they doing this? And we design specific behavioral interventions to support them. So regardless of inclusion doesn't fix everything. But what it will do is allow us to at least set up an environment where students are most likely to be successful. And then we can provide extra supports within that environment. Very much so. So a couple of questions. Let's see. See, this person asked, a student is well below his age or grade. What's the best way to accommodate the student in the general education classroom? It really depends. I wish that this was an easy question. But teachers, it says, how will a teacher deliver a lesson that meets this level inside the classroom while working with the rest of the students? This is where having multiple teachers or multiple people within the classroom is so vital. In order for inclusion to be effective, we have to have enough staff and enough support to be able to make sure that the student can be successful. So it's not only that you're modifying your academic supports for that student, but also it might be that you have somebody coming in and helping that student to be able to catch up or to be able to focus on their own instruction. Or it may be a situation where that student maybe goes to another classroom for instruction for about an hour. Let's say they're doing language arts or English, or, well, English would be English in the United States, but sort of reading or literature. And so maybe they would go to another classroom to do that and then come back to the general education classroom. So there are lots of different options. But when we're thinking about inclusion, it would be having somebody else within that classroom that could support that student as well. So, and there's a question here before we move on from the behavioral side of things. What types of infrequent punishment reprimanding is applied or used? So oftentimes what happens is teachers will very much find all of the problems that are happening in a classroom. So it might be that a student's not paying attention, or they might say, you're not doing this, or you're not doing this, or start doing this, or work faster. That is not the most effective way. It's much better to really focus on what the expectations are, such as saying, I expect that all of you will finish these math assignments within 25 minutes. And then as students are engaging in those skills and they're working, you'll tell them that they're working very hard and you're very impressed by it, or that you're proud of them for finishing, rather than sort of telling them that they're doing something wrong. So we really want to focus on what students are doing well. It says some schools don't have specialized teachers. That's very, very difficult. I think if you don't have specialized teachers, it's important for the other teachers in the classroom, the other teachers in the school, to get training and to learn about different strategies for supporting different students. And that's one of the reasons I gave you all a list of resources to at least get you some ideas about how to gather some knowledge in these areas. So when we think about academic supports for our students, especially in inclusive settings, we really want to ground them in data to make sure that we're looking at I'll share the resources again at the end so that I can give them all to you. We want to make sure that the data for our students is constantly being collected so that we can see if they are actually progressing or not. It's so important that we evaluate whether or not the instruction that we're providing to our students is effective. So we want to make sure that we're doing this, because even when we're collecting data and we're evaluating the progress for all of our students, it helps our students with disabilities, but it actually can help our students who are not struggling, or our students who are even gifted. Because the idea behind inclusion is that everyone benefits, not just the students with disabilities benefit. We really want to focus on the wide range of our students. We use something called data-based individualization in the United States. You'll also see it called curriculum-based measurement. That's sort of an older term. This is a broader iteration of it. And the idea behind it being that we're using ongoing data collection to monitor progress. And then we respond to the data. So we use a validated intervention with the student. We monitor students' progress, and either they're making success And we keep going with that, or we find that it's not working for that student and we try something different. So the idea is that we're constantly evaluating what we're doing to see if what we're doing is the most effective for these very, very students. When we think about access to the general education environment, we want to make sure that we're thinking about standards that we want for all students. So for our students in inclusion, we want to make sure our special education students that are in inclusion, we want to make sure that we're providing those supports. We want to make sure that we are constantly thinking about the goals and objectives that we're designing for our students. And we want to think about appropriate adaptations for our students. And one of the ways we can do this is to differentiate our expectations, meaning that we want to think about the fact that some students will need more support and some students will need less support. And it's okay in an inclusion classroom for not everyone to get the same thing out of a lesson. For some students, you may think, oh, I want to teach different things to these different groups of students. The content is different. Others, it might be, I'm going to teach this differently to these two different groups of students. Or maybe they're going to have a different product, a different way that we evaluate. So one student may write a paper in response to something, and another student may draw a picture in response to something, or talk about what they know. So we really want to think about this range of skills that students can have. Let me quickly pop into the chat to see. Let's see. It says teachers give modifications. Yes, it says, what's the concept of inclusion in the class with students with learning disabilities? That sometimes teachers may be giving another activity or a modification, which may not be targeting the learning objective. So is that still inclusion? Yes, it is. And that is a perfect, it's almost as if I asked you to put that in there, because this takes us straight to, this is called a planning triangle. And Sharon Vaughn and Boss actually came up with this, and I've modified it a little bit for you here. But the idea is that when we initially plan what students are going to learn in a classroom, we want to make sure that students are getting their needs met. And somebody just put in, one size does not fit all. Absolutely. I can't say it any better than that. This idea is when you're starting to think about your instruction, you're thinking about three different levels. So the bottom level of this triangle being what everybody should learn, wanting all students in your classroom to learn, even the students with disabilities, everybody. So what is the very bare minimum in this that you want the students to learn? And then moving up the triangle, what we want most of our students to learn are students that are sort of average range students. And then also not forgetting our gifted students, which we often will forget. We'll often say, oh, our students who are very gifted, they'll be fine. Well, in this case, we're thinking about that very tip of the triangle at the very, very top, what we want some students to learn. So really thinking about when we're teaching, what is the base of everybody has to learn? What's the next level up? And then what's the tiny piece at the top that extra students should learn? Thinking about at all times, how can we modify the materials we're using? How can we think about different strategies that we can use with a wide range of students? And then even thinking about how might we be evaluating students differently? So when we think about this and we think about the range of students in a classroom, we really want to think about trying to encourage all of these students to be successful. And when we're creating this environment that is an accessible environment, which I saw that someone put a question in, how do you build that encouraging atmosphere? When we tell students, this is what we're learning today, and here's what everybody's going to be able to do. And you are really telling students, I'm going to support you, I'm going to help you, I'm going to change what I'm doing, I'm going to add some things here and see that everybody's very, very different in our classroom, but try to meet those needs. That can really start to encourage students. And letting them know that you're not going to let them fail. You're going to help them. You're going to find ways. But when we think about the range of students in a classroom, it's so important to think about what the different goals are for all of the different students in that classroom. Quickly checking questions. So when we're thinking about other supports, I'll get to other questions here in a moment. We want to think about small group or individual instruction within your classroom. So one of the things that oftentimes teachers will do is they'll start a lesson and they'll get the students all working on something, and then they will go and work with the individual students within the classroom. It's very helpful to have a classroom assistant, a teacher's assistant in the classroom, or a special educator during this time. And you can also do things like set up graphic organizers or planners or ways to support the students that are learning. And when you're always, it cannot stress enough, back to this idea of this triangle, that you always plan for all students at the outset. So you can't just do it last minute. It has to be part of your full planning for your students. A couple of questions. Let me get into the chat. Let's see. Oh, so many questions. It says that, let's see. Some students imitate other students in the classroom. Yes, it is not uncommon for students to imitate other students. So in this case, it says, I noticed that in the kindergarten, they imitate their friend who might be hyperactive. Not with bad intention, but they just are imitating. So that's where, back at the beginning, when we were talking about sort of expectations in the classroom, what you want to do as a teacher is to teach kids that this is the right thing to do, this is the wrong thing to do, and then provide supports for the student who is maybe a little overactive. And then provide instruction on more appropriate ways to behave, and then also to provide praise and reinforcement for that, especially for that student who is very hyperactive in the classroom, because we want him to know, or her to know, that when they behave appropriately, that they're going to get lots and lots of praise. So very, very important, very important. So somebody said planning and organization. Yes, lots of planning and organization is needed for students to be able to be successful in inclusive classrooms. It takes quite a lot of time. I'm going to quickly jump out for just a moment of my share. I'm going to stop my share for very briefly to put a couple of things into the chat. Okay, I'm going to put these two resources back into the chat in case anybody needs them or didn't get them at the beginning. So one is just a copy of this PowerPoint, and another is a copy of resources. And let me go back to sharing my screen. Thank you for bearing with me, everyone. Very good. Okay, so these are a couple of my very favorite resources for allowing you to gather more information or to learn. The IRIS Center, which is actually funded by the US Department of Education, and it's free, completely free, is full of different online modules and learning modules that run the gamut. So there are a lot on behavior, there are a lot on reading instruction, writing instruction, math. There are even supports for setting up classrooms for individuals who have visual disabilities, for communication difficulties, early childhood. It's a really tremendous resource. It can be used for personal training. It's also can be used with classroom assistants and teaching them about different disabilities and different methods for supporting students. The National Center on Intensive Intervention has supports related to academic and behavioral supports for students. And it also has a very strong focus on that data-based individualization. So using data to expand and support students. The Center on Positive Behavioral Interventions and Supports is very, very useful when you're thinking about setting up those classrooms that are very supportive of a wide range of students and are very highly predictable. The Cedar Center has a whole section on what we call high leverage practices. And there are videos and resources to help you learn to use a wide range of what we call highly effective interventions and practices for students. And then the resource that I gave you is actually, it's a 2-page resource full of other options and other supports that you can utilize. This is my information, and then I'm going to stop the share and then just focus on some questions now. Oh, let me. Hang on, I'm having quite a slight issue. Okay, hopefully that's okay. For some reason, it seems like it's still allowing sharing. Anyway, okay, so I do see a hand raised. Anam Mudasar, it says that there's a hand raised. Oh, contact details up again, yes. Oh, and also my contact, hang on one moment. My contact details, I'll put them up again, but also they're in the PowerPoint that I shared in the chat. So yes, Anam, please. Did you have a question?
Hi, Ms. Anam. You
Yes.
can unmute your microphone, please. Ms. Anam.
Anam, did you have a question?
You can unmute your microphone, Ms. Anam.
Oh, let's see if there are other questions while we're waiting. Let's see, what is the difference between inclusion in school and higher education? So we actually have different programs here in the United States for inclusion in higher education as well. It's very, very different. There are not as many supports. We have ways that we can provide extra support to students, but it's quite different. We also have specialized programs for individuals who have severe disabilities also in the United States. So it might be a specialized program. So it can be somewhat different. Let's see. More questions. It says, I'm awful with Shahida. I see that you have a hand raised.
Hello, can you hear?
Yes,
How
I can.
you?
I'm very well. I'm very well.
Okay, I have this question because now sometimes in the class there is a teacher and learning support assistant, and sometimes kids does not give that much preference to the learning assistant. So what is the solution in that case?
Yes. So sometimes we run into situations where students don't respond to certain adults in the classroom, and it's very important that that the teacher, the lead teacher in the classroom, tell all of the students that other assistant in the classroom is also an adult and needs to be listened to. And sometimes it can also be that the child that the learning assistant is working with hasn't had that opportunity to really get to know the learning assistant. So it often is, it has to be this work with the teacher and the learning assistant and the students as a whole, that they all see each other as a team, as opposed to the lead teacher and the assistant. So it really has to be from the teacher down, that the teacher needs to express that. I don't know if that answered the question very well, but it really has to come from the teacher, that the students need to be respectful and to pay attention to and to respond to the learning assistant. The other thing that I would say also is to make sure that the learning assistant has gotten some training to help them to be able to be successful with these students. So the more knowledge that the learning assistant has, often that will help as well.
So it's basically like the teacher has to remind the students the power of the learning assistant, right?
Very much so. Yes. Yes. And then oftentimes, if the learning assistant can be a part of the, I was talking about praise. Oftentimes the learning assistant will be the one who may still tell kids they've done some things that are wrong. But if the learning assistant can also be part of that sort of side of telling students when they're doing the right thing, that's important too. But the teacher really has to tell the students that they need to be listening to this learning assistant as well.
Oh, thank you so much. I got it.
Yes, please. And any other questions? Let's see. Walaa Etawi, I'm sorry, I'm so bad with names. Please.
Hi, Miss Wala. You can unmute your microphone, please. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I just would like to ask this question and to clarify the differences between inclusion and mainstreaming and integration.
Yes.
And does it affect the teaching strategies while we are speaking about inclusion or mainstreaming or integration? Because I know that inclusion is let's say the umbrella and contains mainstreaming and integration as well. But does that affect or has an impact on the teaching strategies? Or this is my question.
No, that's a very good question. No, it really doesn't change the strategies. The idea behind inclusion, and so mainstreaming is sort of an older term that I always laugh that when I was trained, it was all about mainstreaming, and now it's all about inclusion and integration. So they're all words that you'll see used over in the same way. But it shouldn't change the strategies. The idea behind all of this is that we're really focusing on individualizing based on what students need. So the strategies really are, open. Any strategy is open to you that is effective with those students. So it shouldn't matter based on sort of the terminology.
So it doesn't have any difference between inclusion, integration, and mainstreaming, right?
No, they really are used interchangeably.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Yes, please. Let's see, any other hands raised? Miriam? Miss Miriam?
Yes, hi.
Yes.
Thank you for your very interesting and beneficial presentation. I just was wondering about really the gifted students and the fast learner students in this process, the inclusion process, because I feel it's unfair for them, and they can learn faster, and this situation will be very boring for them, and
very much so. I completely agree.
They can achieve much better if they are in another environment that can challenge them more. But this situation, I feel it's unfair for them, especially if there are some cases that need individual attention from the teacher and the helper, and sometimes some cases need one-to-one handling. So I think those gifted students, or at least they are, we can say like normal cases, they will be left behind their goals. So what do you think about that?
So when inclusion is done well, right, when it is done well, we are meeting the needs of all of our students. Which is one of the things that makes it very, very difficult. And that's one of the reasons that at the end I shared that planning pyramid, because we can't forget our students who are gifted. The idea in an inclusive setting is that you are really meeting the needs of that full range of students. So we are meeting the needs of our students who are struggling, but we're also meeting the needs of our students who are really, really gifted and who are flourishing. So we want to make
it's
sure.
It's an impossible equation here.
It's
really impossible equation to meet in the middle. Definitely. You are like tightening the abilities of good students, and never you cannot achieve such equation where you can meet in the middle and in the same time you can like achieve the best of everybody. It's just impossible. And
no. I don't disagree with you. And that's why when we think about staffing issues within an inclusive setting, is that we have to make sure that there are enough adults in the building, enough people in the classroom that are able to provide those supports. And that's where when we have students who are struggling, like significantly struggling, there are times in our classrooms where we don't keep them all in the same classroom. So they may be in a classroom for most of the day together, but then for certain academic areas, they will go and get extra support in another classroom or in a different area within the classroom, as opposed to the students who are more gifted. So we in the United States, we do not do a phenomenal job with our gifted students. I'll be honest with you, because
it's
those
everywhere.
it's
attention is
very,
given
very
to the people with disabilities.
Mariam, allow me just please, because we need to give a chance for other attendees to ask questions. So let Dr. Andrea answer your question, and
thank you.
we'll give it to others. Thank you.
And then I believe there's Asma has their hand raised. Please, Asma.
Hi.
Yes.
Hi.
Yes.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much for the informative information. I have a question. Okay. I don't know whether you are listening, whether my voice is audible or not.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm asking about the speech impairment. When some children have, some students, particularly kids aged 8, 9 years old, they have a speech impairment. What activities that as a teacher I would I would use in the classrooms to help them to decrease such way, to be included, in order to achieve the matter of the inclusion in the classroom. This is the first, as a teacher, I mean, and even as a parent. Some parents do not know how to deal. I think it's the same way. If I don't know actually, but it's a matter of family support or something like that. So as a teacher, how can I deal with both parents and the students in this term?
Yes. So I am not a speech language pathologist. So that is not my strongest area.
Yeah.
There are some resources on the IRIS Center that I gave you that should have some resources on speech language. And actually, if you wouldn't mind, you can email me and I will try to put you in contact with some speech language pathologists that might be able to help with that. In general, though, what we try to do is to provide as much opportunity practicing speaking in the classroom, and to make it successful for that student, because oftentimes children, once they reach 8, 9 years old, they start to get very nervous about speaking because they notice that they're different. So we want to make the environment around that student very supportive, and to try to kind of create this environment of care for them.
Okay.
So that's
Another question is that what are the criteria of the encouraging atmosphere? What can I do as a teacher to encourage students to be involved in the process of teaching and learning?
Yes. So I think it always starts out with creating a space in your classroom where the children know what you expect of them, and that you understand that they understand, what you want them to do. And then also making sure that when they see you in the classroom, that you're letting students know when they are doing well in the classroom. So providing a lot of praise, and also praising other students for being kind to each other. So I think that is one of those things that if you can set up your classroom so that it's a space where it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to not be perfect, and that you're always there willing to help them, and you're telling them when they are doing the right thing. I think that's very, very important. Very important.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate you.
Oh no, thank you so much. It has truly been an honor to.
I hope that that I get your email so that I contact you.
Yes, it's in that PowerPoint that I gave, and I'm also going to put it in one more time in the chat for everyone. I apologize because I know some of you already have all of this, but I put the copy of the PowerPoint as well as the resources into the chat one more time for everyone, and my information is on there.
Okay, thank you for your generosity.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Let's see. Are we finishing at 8 now, or can I take one more question? Dr. Mohammed?
Yes, Dr. Andrea. If you want to take one more question, it's fine.
Okay, I'll take one more question. It says, Fe Juliet Madamba raised her hand.
Yes, ma'am. Hi, good evening.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm an inclusion assistant also of a student that has autism. And I have heard from our session in regards about parents who's afraid of admitting that their, child has disability of like this. And I'm one of the assistant inclusion that is having or is struggling of having a parent like this, that every time they have to ask the development of a child from me, and each day I have to tell, and if possible they want it to be like, why is it that like this and like that, why can't be not normal or not be the same as the child, the thing that has been teaching inside of the classroom. And every time I have to tell it has to be like this, it's because my student has, it's very slow to pick up things. And why is it that it's me who's going to tell all of these things when in fact they know exactly what their child has or having?
Yes, and I think it's so very, very hard. I think parents often are, it takes a lot for a parent to admit and understand that their child has a disability. And parents often will keep asking and asking and asking because it is so hard for them to accept it. And there's not an easy way, and it's not an easy answer. And it's all that I could say is just to continue to be kind and compassionate, as it sounds like you are, and to try to explain it to the parent and educate them on the disability and on what you can do and what you can't do. But it sounds to me like you're a very caring person who wants very much for this family to be at peace with this, but it's often very, very difficult. So
Thank you, Mom. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
oh, thank you for what you do. And I just want to thank everyone for your kindness and your interest in this topic. And it has truly been a gift to be able to speak with you all today.
Are you there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Andrea, for the great and informative presentation. Hope you all enjoyed our first session, and see you tomorrow at 5 p.m. in Module 2, Disabilities Covered by Special Education. Have a great evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Andrea. Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure having you, and have a great day ahead.
Oh, and thank you both. Thank you all, actually. And then, and I also sent you the copies of the materials in case you end up needing to post them somewhere.
Yeah, we
Like-
post them in the portal, so the attendants will be having an access to it also on the portal.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, and good
Thank
luck with all of your trainings.
Thank you, dear. Thanks a lot, and have a great day.
Okay. Bye-bye.